Hello everyone, it's Michael Lazar here, and welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to sing high-pitched phrases. Now, this is a very important concept. In any genre of music, you're going to find that you're going to have phrases that are pretty high-pitched or that run towards the top end of your range, and you might have trouble using that part of your range. For a lot of guys, especially after puberty when the voice has changed, they don't really use any of the range between G3 and E5. You usually end up sticking down to the maybe half an octave of the range, and it's usually pretty low. And a lot of women who don't sing might find themselves only using the lower part or the upper parts of the range, and they really don't really have a good sense of using one or the other, or even using both in a mixed way. So the question is then, when you're given a higher pitched phrase, how do you approach it when you're having trouble or you're struggling getting out a good sound? So the first thing is you need to understand the musical direction of where you're going. There's a couple of indicators for this. First, look at the text of what you're singing. The text is a pretty big giveaway. Look at what is the text saying and how do I reflect that and express it with my voice. That's one thing. After the text, look at the scale you're in or the mode you're in. Are you in a major key? Are you in a minor key? Are you in Byzantine, for example? Are you in a chromatic mode? Are you in a diatonic cadence during this event? When you're singing high-pitched cadence, you need to understand not just the sound of what you're singing, but how does that sound fit into the emotional context of the music? This really does impact how you sing those higher phrases, because this gives you an idea of where to go musically. If you don't know what to do musically, you will not be able to execute these correctly. The next thing, and this is something I alluded to, is knowing the tonal center well. The tonal center is really, really important. So you need to understand, if you're in the major key, for example, where you are in that scale. And you need to have that in your head. You need to understand the intonation and the actual sound of the scale you're singing. If you're just guessing the notes and not really understanding what you're singing, of course it's not going to work. In Byzantine chant, if you are having a hard time singing the upper half of the diatonic scale, of course, if you sing any music with the upper half of the diatonic scale, you're going to fall short. If you're in jazz and you're a jazz singer and you don't know how to sing the upper half of a minor scale or a Dorian scale, well, then of course you're going to mess up when you're on those upper half of those scales. So what that means is, as a singer, you need to take the time to really refine your scales and understand the different tonal centers and the different strong points in those. On the Western scale, these are the primary pitches. So the 1, the tonic, the 4, the subdominant, and the 5, the dominant. Those are the very strong pitches. You need to understand how they work in that scale. So as honestly just hearing them and being able to stay in tune with them. In Byzantine chant, it really means knowing what the base mode of that thesis is, for example, a diatonic on cat thesis, you need to know where that cat is, and you need to know what the notes that go up from there and under there sound like really well. If you don't have this locked down, you don't have your intonation locked down and your vocal stability locked down, it's not going to work. That is a technical and also musical aspect. And this goes into my third thing. The next thing you have to do is be able to hear what you're singing and actively process it. There's a lot of singers, and chanters especially, who just sing into the void and don't have a feedback mechanism where they listen back to what they're singing. And these people are really frustrating to chant with, because it's like they have no sense of musicality. They can't listen back to what they're singing. So blending is impossible. And then also just the end product just becomes chaotic, because there's no sense of listening and trying to blend, not just blend musically, but also try to fit your voice to fit other people's voices. When you're not listening back even to yourself, you don't have this feedback mechanism going. And guess what? Your singing can become quite harsh. You don't ever want to play music into a void. You want to play music and listen back to it and adapt what you're hearing. As humans, we are not robots. We don't just play music in like a MIDI computer. We have all these complex sounds and things we go for. So as a singer, you need to actively be engaged with your ear. And this will definitely help to improve those higher cadences. So let's go to a bit more technical things. Something you need to do is warm up. If you're not warming up before you sing, That's like the worst thing you can do for yourself. It's like if somebody's going to run a marathon and they're not doing a couple stretches, or they're not doing a light jog before they go, or they're not drinking any water or taking any electrolytes. If you don't warm up before you sing, you run the risk of injury. You run the risk of performing a lot worse. Not even run the risk, you will perform a lot worse. It's like if you're going to race your car, you don't race your car when it's cold. You race your car when it's warmed up. Same thing with your voice. And when you warm up, you need to warm up at least 1 to 3 notes higher, notes being half steps higher, than the highest note you plan on singing. If you plan on singing an A, you should probably warm up to a B flat, so that A is more comfortable in your range and feels a bit more anchored. The B flat, those ones don't have to be as solid, because guess what? They're not going to be as solid. That's just how it is. But if you warm up there, that note that's a little lower will feel a lot more stable. And that's something a lot of people overlook. They feel like warming up, oh, I don't need to warm up. You should. Another thing is that you need to sing more using your upper register. For a lot of men, after puberty, their voices change. A lot of guys feel like they become basses. Even myself, when I hit puberty, my voice really overcorrected. I went from a very high soprano to a bass. And, my upper range as a soprano was really, really, really high. I was singing maybe a C6 up to an F6. It was crazy. My voice changed, and guess what? I could barely sing an F above middle C without my voice cracking. And it took a bit of time to work up to about a B natural, C natural, on the treble clef. It takes time to build up there. So as a guy, you need to start using upper range more often. If you only sing with the first half octave of your range, you'll never be able to sing high notes. If you only work up to sing an A or a B, you won't even sing up middle C. It's like you will never be able to sing anything above that. And not just that, your pitches, A3 or A4, I guess, and B4, depending on how you define the pitches. Your pitches, no matter how high you go, even if it's not that high, you'll still feel uncomfortable because you're not used to using the upper part of your range. So again, you need to start using it more often, and doing exercises that utilize it helps a lot. Now, this might get a little technical, but I'm going to talk about a concept called registration. And a lot of it is about utilizing your voice correctly for high notes, and making sure that you're getting the sound and color you want. So, as a singer, this might get a bit scientific, but it's very helpful. You have 2 muscles that control your vocal cords. The names are the thyroarytenoid muscles, and which are the ones that are responsible for the chest voice, and then the cricothyroid muscles, which are responsible for producing in men that falsetto, or in women the head voice. And for men, a lot of times, those upper end notes, they're still in the chest voice. They don't really go to that falsetto. But for women especially, most of the middle range and upper range is in that head voice sound. If you're not used to using your head voice as a woman, you should be used to it. And there's a lot of transition points. There's 2 main ones. The concept is like the first passage, the primo passaggio, and then the second passage. The first passage when you go from that chest voice to the head voice. And the second one is just a different way of using your head voice. That's a bit different placed. And then for a guy, that the whole first and second transition still use the chest voice, but it has a different shade of lightness to it, or a different color to it. So as a guy, you need to be able to use your voice throughout those vocal transitions that happen. So how do you do that? Well, you do exercises that utilize a wide range of your voice. If you're doing exercises that only use half an octave of your voice, and it's not really any of the switching points, it's just in the lower octave or middle part, that's not going to be as helpful as doing some of the transition parts. The parts don't sound good. Those parts where it's like, okay, how do I stabilize my voice? How do I get my voice to be consistent throughout this transition? That's how you get better at singing higher pitches. Because once you figure out that stabilization, it becomes a lot better, easier to sing those notes. So that's with registration. What that means is essentially, if you're a woman, lighten up on those higher notes. Be comfortable going to your head voice. You don't have to belt out those high notes. And for a guy, that means being comfortable switching between, different parts of your voice. If you're used to only singing notes like e, with that deepness and richness in it, try lightening up, covering a bit more. It's using the soft palate to lift up higher, and go a little bit higher and see if you can get that same color with a different feeling in your voice. That will help to stabilize and get those high notes to be more comfortable. Other thing is you have to make sure you give enough air support. And these things I've talked about in other videos, but I just want to reiterate them. If you don't have enough air support, you're not going to get a sound out, especially for high notes. That air has to be fast. It has to keep going. The moment you start hesitating on the air, unless you want that sound, your voice is going to come out a lot weaker. Another thing is you need to make sure your mouth has enough space. Again, a more open mouth takes off some of that pressure, like a relaxed jaw, takes out some pressure from the technical word is the hyoid bone, but it's that kind of the bone that your vocal cords and larynx are attached to. But just relaxing your jaw, if you relax your jaw, it becomes a lot easier to sing. And getting a more open space takes a lot of pressure off your vocal cords. So when you open your mouth more, you just feel a lot freer, and the sound comes out a lot better. And then finally, this is something I've always been saying, and I still think every chanter, every singer needs to do, is always sing from above. Unless you want to scoop into the note, which you don't for a lot of cases, you should always try to hit the note from above. That just gives a much cleaner sound. And instead of having intonation problems, you have perfect intonation. If you know what you're hearing and you approach the note correctly, that helps a lot. And when I say come from above, that means aim for the note about a half step higher and position it for that while singing the goal note. So if you're aiming for like a ma, you aim for ma, just a little bit higher. So when you land on that ma, you land right on it instead of going flat like ma. You see how that's really flat compared to the first one? So that's going to help you a lot. So again, to summarize everything, it's not the technical problems only. There's a lot of technique involved in singing high notes. And singing high notes does take time to progress. But a lot of times, we don't have the direction of where we're going. And we don't have that idea of the tonal center or what we want to hear in our head to help guide us. So I hope this video helps just allow you to find or think of new solutions to your problems. Again, this is not a one-size-fits-all. These are just things that you might not be doing that are preventing you from singing those higher passages. So, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I would greatly appreciate if you liked and subscribed. Other than that, I'll see you in the next one, and have a great day.